everybody, and welcome to PopLove's tutorial on how to mordant or pre-treat organic cotton before you dye. So thanks for joining us today, and like I mentioned, we're going to be going over today the details on how exactly you need to pre-treat cotton before you dye it. And I'll go into detail a little later on in the tutorial as to why we need to do that. But first, let's go over some of the things you're going to need today, okay? Obviously, the most important is your t-shirts, okay? Your t-shirts or whatever raw fabric you're going to be using. Now, keep in mind, it doesn't have to be organic cotton. This is for any kind of cotton. It could be for an old t-shirt that you want to freshen up or whatever. It doesn't really matter. So today we're going to be dyeing about 250 grams, okay? And that's when it's dry, the weight when it's dry. So you'll need your t-shirts. Okay, you're also going to need a few chemicals, okay? Today we're going to be working with sodium carbonate light, otherwise known as soda ash, okay? We're going to be working with alum, okay? And our third ingredient, which you're going to find very amusing, I'm sure, is cream of tartar, okay? This is our tannin, and I'll go into detail a little bit more about why we need a tannin a little later in the tutorial. Besides the chemicals, you're going to need a couple of other things. You're going to need a heat source, okay? We've got our little electric burner here that we're using. You're going to need a pot filled with boiling water, okay? Make sure that this is a pot that you do not use for cooking. You do not want to be mixing your pasta with alum. I mean, none of these are toxic, but it's just generally better when it comes to dyeing to have a separate pot for all that stuff. You're also going to need a little kitchen scale, okay, and a couple of measuring spoons, cups, whatever, measuring tools, and a wooden spoon or something to mix with, as well as gloves. You don't have to wear gloves, it's better that way. Alright, so let's start with our procedure. How do we get to do all this, alright? The first thing you're going to want to do is take a couple of liters of boiling water, okay? Put that on to boil. You want to have it nice and boiling hot just because everything, when it comes to dyeing, that's what you need. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start by measuring out the ingredients that we need, okay? So first thing we're going to start with is 50 grams of aluminum sulfate, otherwise known as alum, okay? And just take your measuring spoon, turn on your kitchen scale. Okay, there we go. We've got 50 grams of alum. Okay. And we're just going to take that and we're going to put that into our boiling water. And just mix it up. Okay? We want to make sure that everything's dissolved, because that's a good thing. I sound like Martha Stewart. It's a good thing. Okay. It doesn't really take long. If the water's boiling, it'll just take a second, and you're ready to go. Next step, okay, we're going to be using our cream of tartar. Okay, we want 25 grams of the cream of tartar. Now, most of you are probably looking at me with this horrified face, like, what the heck are you using, cream of tartar in your t-shirts, right? Now, the reason we're using cream of tartar is because it's a tannin-based powder, okay? Now, what tannins are, they are the chemical that you'll find in things like wine, tea. There's a reason that those things stain, and it's because of the tannins that you'll find in them. So, those things that you hate when you're doing your laundry and, you're trying to get out tea stains and, wine stains and this kind of thing, that's because of this stuff. Now, that said, this also means that when you're washing your t-shirts that you've dyed, okay, you want to make sure you're using a very mild soap, a very cool temperature when you're washing them. This is after you've dyed them and everything, okay? Because unlike things like silk and wool, cotton doesn't like to take color. It's a fabric that's more difficult to dye than others typically are, okay? And that's actually due to the actual chemical molecular structure of the fibers. things like wool and silk are a lot easier to dye. And this is because of just the way that they're built. It's just like your hair, okay? They have little cuticles on the actual, strands. And all you need to do in order to dye those kinds of materials is open up those cuticles, and the dye is going to take, and then you rinse them in vinegar afterwards. That's why you use vinegar. And it seals up those cuticles, making the color molecules stick inside. So it's really simple. The thing with cottons, and also with linen, okay, any natural plant fiber, the problem you have with these, this also includes hemp. These are all cellulose fibers, which means they don't have the same cuticles that protein fibers have. So in order for the dye to actually stick and stay, you need to pre-treat it with some certain chemicals in order for these to be able to hold on to the color. Otherwise, you'll spend all this nice time, you'll go out and you'll buy the dye, and you'll dye your t-shirt, and then you'll go and wash it, and then the next day it's going to be like, the color's going to be gone after 1 or 2 washes. So, that said, just like over time any tea stain will dye, and any wine stain is going to, wash out with time, the same thing can happen with the colors that you're using to dye your cotton t-shirts. So in order to preserve that, okay, anything that's been dyed in sort of a natural and not heavily chemicaled, way, you're going to need to pre-treat it like this, but you're also going to want to make sure that when you're washing it later on, you're washing it very mildly, like I said, mild detergent, cold water, and this is going to help the colors stay on the t-shirts longer. But eventually they are going to start to fade, just like denim on your jeans, right? You wash blue jeans enough times, they fade with time, which is pretty. Some people like it, but if you want to keep it nice and vibrant, cold water, mild detergent. Now, we've got our aluminum sulfate in here, we've got our tannin, so now we just need our last ingredient, okay, which is about 15 grams of soda ash, otherwise known as sodium carbonate or sodium carbonate light. And this is my favorite part. So just hold on, my scale turned off here. Just hold on, let's measure it out. Okay, like I said, we want about 15 grams. It's 11, we need a little bit more. Now we've got our 15 grams of soda ash, okay? Watch carefully, because like I said, this is my favorite part. Okay? Make sure that the steam isn't blowing into your face here. Whoa! Okay. Maybe try putting in a little bit at a time. Not putting it all at once. My lovely assistant Shy is going to get us a towel. Or a paper towel. Say hi, Shy! Alright. Another point, you want to make sure that you're doing this in an area where it's not going to be tragic if you spill or if you get a mess everywhere. If you have a yard, I recommend doing it out there. Otherwise, you don't want to be doing this in your kitchen, in your living room, where you have to worry about getting everything disastrously messy. Because it's a messy process doing this stuff at home. Wait until you get to the dyeing. This is just the pre-treating stage. Okay, a little more paper towel, and I think we're ready to go here. But you can see that it dissolves pretty quickly, and the chemical reaction, is pretty slow. No, sorry, pretty fast. It happens pretty quickly, and then it dissolves up, and then we're ready to go. So now, what we're going to want to do is, once you've cleaned up the mess, hopefully you won't have a mess in the first place if you put it in slower. I get a little too excited about that stuff. So now what we want to do is we want to take our t-shirts, okay, and we're ready to put them into the bath. Now a couple of things before I put them in, or as I'm putting them in. You want to make sure that they're wet, okay? Not soaking, dripping wet, but you want to make sure that they're damp. Now, the reason you want to make sure that your t-shirts are damp are for a couple of reasons. Number one, cotton absorbs chemicals, and it absorbs just about anything better when it's wet, okay? It's just the wicking properties of the fibers. they tend to absorb better when they're wet. So that's for one. The second thing is it's much easier to avoid having air bubbles in your t-shirts or in your fabric when it's wet, because you want to make sure that everything is completely submerged in the dye bath, in the mordanting bath. The reason for this, a couple of things. Anytime you have air pockets or little bubbles inside the t-shirts, and you can see there's a couple of areas where it's just floating up out of the water, okay? You want to try and avoid that, because you want this to absorb completely, okay? What happens if it doesn't? You're going to have when you're mordanting, this is clear. You can't see anything in this. But afterwards, when you're doing the dye bath, you'll see there might be areas where you'll have, I don't know, like a little spot here and there where the dye doesn't seem to take quite as well. And that's going to be because if this is scrunched up in a little ball, or if there's areas sticking up out of the bath, what's going to happen is it's not going to absorb the chemicals properly. And then you're going to be stuck with, you know, cotton that's unevenly pre-treated, and if it's unevenly pre-treated, then it's going to be unevenly dyed later on as well. So we want to avoid that. So a couple of we want to make sure that it's wet, and we also want to make sure that when you're putting it into the dye bath, you're putting it in pretty evenly, okay? You don't want it scrunched up in a ball, like I said, and you want it to have the most surface area possible to absorb the, you know, the dye bath. So take a minute here, you know, squeeze out any little pockets of air that you see. Try and get everything completely submerged. It might take a minute, but it's worth the little extra effort.